Thanks for tuning in, everyone. Welcome to another update on the war in Ukraine. You are listening to The Account. Today is the official holiday for the servicemen and employees of the radio engineering troops of the Air Force of the Armed Forces of Ukraine. Let us all take a moment to congratulate them and also remember those who laid down their lives for their country. According to Valery Zaluzhny, the commander-in-chief of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, it is thanks to them that over 80% of the Russian air targets are intercepted. A quote: "During the 9 months of the full-scale war, the Air Force's radio technical troops have identified and tracked more than 240,000 enemy air targets. About 80% have been destroyed by our firepower. These are hundreds of thousands of lives saved. This represents preserved infrastructure facilities. And this is an indicator of the high skill of our soldiers. I'm proud. Thank you for your service and congratulate the servicemen and employees of the radio technical troops of the Air Force of the Armed Forces of Ukraine on their official holiday." We will start our news section with the evening report by the General Staff of Ukraine. In the Bakhmut direction, the enemy continues to focus its main efforts on conducting offensive operations. The occupiers are trying to improve their tactical position in the Avdiivka direction. In order to replenish the current losses of units of the Russian occupation forces, the early graduation of cadets from higher military educational institutions of the Russian Federation is planned in the first quarter of 2023. In addition, preparation for the next wave of mobilization, scheduled for January to February 2023, are ongoing on the territory of the Russian Federation. In the city of Khostalny, in the temporarily occupied territory of the Luhansk Oblast, the Russian occupation authorities announced the end of mobilization. At the same time, the occupiers continue to patrol the city, and at the exits from the settlement, a thorough check is carried out on all those who wish to leave. It has been confirmed that enemy units were defeated in the Zaporizhia region during November 28th to 29th of this year. Thus, in the area of Myrne, Polohy, and Tokmak settlements, the enemy lost about 100 people wounded, 5 units of military equipment were destroyed. And now for the main flashpoints along the front. Bakhmut. Contradicting reports about the situation south of the city. Some Russian sources claim that Russian forces captured Kurdyumivka, while others report that heavy fighting is still ongoing. Other Russian claimed successes could not be verified. Wagner leader Yevgeny Prigozhin confirmed that Russian forces did not control Myrne as reported yesterday. The Institute for the Study of War said in its assessment that Russian forces made marginal gains around Bakhmut on November 29th, but Russian forces remain unlikely to have advanced at the tempo that Russian sources claimed. A video shared yesterday allegedly shows Ukrainian forces still in Kurdyumivka. It was geolocated to the southern part of the settlement. It is suggested the troops were encircled but managed to retreat. So far, we have no visual confirmation of the Russian claims. However, we can safely assume that Ukrainian defenders have been knocked out of their positions. Further reports claim that Russian forces also managed to recapture the garbage dump east of Bakhmut. Pavlivka. Today, Russian forces released another drone video. The footage is geolocated to the southwestern part of the settlement. It cannot be verified when the footage was taken, but we have seen another video yesterday in the same area. If this is recent footage, it would suggest Ukrainian forces are still present in Pavlivka. Moving on to the UK Ministry of Defense intelligence update. In July 2022, Russian President Vladimir Putin approved amendments to the 2012 Foreign Agents Law, which has been widely used to repress opponents of the regime. The new measures are scheduled to come into force on December 1, 2022. The 2012 law defined foreign agents as individuals or organizations who have received financial support from abroad. The amendments will extend the definition to those which are merely under undefined influence or pressure of foreign actors. The Ministry of Justice will also have the power to publish the personal details and addresses of designated foreign agents, almost certainly placing them at risk of harassment. The new laws will further extend the repressive powers available to the Russian state. This continues a trend since Putin returned to the presidency in 2012, but which has dramatically accelerated since the invasion of Ukraine. The Kremlin is likely acting preemptively to prevent greater domestic dissent as the conflict remains unresolved and increasingly impacts Russians' everyday lives. And now we will switch over to the important news of the day. Reuters published an article regarding the November 26th intelligence update by the UK Ministry of Defence. As you might remember, the intelligence update cited open source imagery showing the wreckage of an air-launched cruise missile that seemed to have been designed to carry a nuclear delivery system. An unnamed US military official was quoted as saying that Russia is firing unarmed cruise missiles designed to carry nuclear warheads at targets in Ukraine to try to deplete Kyiv's stocks of air defenses. While this is the first comment by a US official, the Pentagon has said previously that the escalation of Russia's missile strikes in Ukraine is partly designed to deplete Ukraine's air defenses and finally achieve air superiority. Due to these circumstances, the United States and other allies are focused on providing air defense supplies for Ukraine. Yesterday evening, it was reported that both NATO and the US are considering sending Patriot air defense systems to Ukraine. In an immediate response, Dmitry Medvedev, deputy head of the Security Council of the Russian Federation, released a statement saying that any systems shipped to Ukraine would become legal targets for Russia. Later, Pentagon representative Brigadier General Pat Ryder stated in a briefing that the US does not yet plan to hand over the Patriot air defense system to Ukraine. However, air defense remains a priority. Earlier today, Ursula von der Leyen, the head of the European Commission, said in her address that 20,000 civilians and 100,000 Ukrainian soldiers had been killed in the war so far. Shortly after the address was released, the mention of killed was removed from all publications. Dana Spinant, Deputy Chief Spokesperson for the European Commission and Director for Political Communication, noted that the previous version of von der Leyen's address contained inaccurate figures and thanked those who pointed out the mistake. According to Spinat, the numbers were taken from an external source and were meant to reflect losses in killed and wounded. When asked for comment, Bohdan Senik, head of the Public Relations Department of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, said the following: "We cannot confirm this figure. We emphasize that the losses of the Ukrainian army are classified information and are subject to restrictions on publication. At the same time, if the information announced by the President of the European Commission will allow us to bring the aggressor country to justice, we can only support actions that will contribute to legal punishment for those who organized the genocide of the Ukrainian people. Everything must be done to ensure that all those responsible for the loss of civilian and military citizens of Ukraine end up in the dock." Furthermore, von der Leyen said in her address that the EU and the International Criminal Court are planning to create a specialized court to investigate and prosecute war crimes committed in Ukraine. According to a statement made by the Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu, Russia created roughly 8,000 military units made up of the 300,000 Russians mobilized for the war in Ukraine. A quote: "More than 300,000 reservists called up for partial mobilization were trained in 2 months. They were trained at more than 100 training grounds in Russia and Belarus, and 3,000 instructors were involved." However, reports from POWs and other sources would suggest that many mobilized soldiers have been sent to reinforce the front lines without any training at all. This comes amid a report by the Institute for the Study of War that Russian forces continue to struggle with outdated equipment and personnel shortages as Russia seems to be preparing for another wave of mobilization. Ivan Fedorov, the mayor of Melitopol, reported today that Russia is moving equipment from a hospital in the frontline town of Polohy to occupied Mariupol in Donetsk Oblast because it's getting too hot on the Zaporizhia front. Local residents report that Russian forces are taking everything that has survived out of the hospital, while machine gun fire can be heard in the vicinity of the town. The mayor also commented on explosions heard at a local club in Myrne where Russian mobilized soldiers were accommodated. He said, "After 1 a.m., there were several loud explosions in the local club where the newly arrived mobilized Russian soldiers settled in. They partied so loudly that even the residents of Melitopol woke up. Information about enemy casualties is being clarified. Myrne is located roughly 30 kilometers northeast of Melitopol." Bloomberg published an article yesterday claiming that the US may label Russia's Wagner group as a terrorist organization. While the Biden administration has not made a final decision yet, moving against Wagner would mark a new US effort to counter the mercenary group. At the same time, Andriy Yermak, head of the Office of the President, described the role of convicts recruited by Wagner. They are being taken to positions without weapons like cannon fodder. Then, the so-called mules deliver these weapons just before the order to run forward. They get a machine gun and raid our positions with no body armor or helmets. They are Russian cons recruited by Wagner. This is what happens every day near Bakhmut. They lay down hundreds of such people in the hope that they will be able to weaken our defenses. Behind this cannon fodder are the regular soldiers. The Spanish newspaper El Independiente reports that one person was slightly injured after a letter bomb sent to the Ukrainian embassy in Madrid exploded. According to sources, the explosion occurred when the embassy worker tried to open the letter. The private surveillance service of the Ukrainian embassy in Madrid did not detect the device. It is reported that the letter was addressed to the ambassador of Ukraine to Spain. The police have activated their anti-terrorist protocol and cordoned off the area around the embassy. The ambassador said, "The package contained a box which caused suspicion to the commandant, and he decided to take it outside with no one in the vicinity and open it. After opening the box and hearing a click that followed, he tossed it and then heard the explosion. Despite not holding the box at the time of the explosion, the commandant hurt his hands and received a concussion." And now I would like to mention an interesting article by CNN titled, "How Ukraine is Innovating Soviet-Era Weapons for a 21st Century Battleground." The article explores how bookish Ukrainian soldiers in basement command centers direct artillery along the Eastern Front. This is a testing ground for a new 21st century warfare. Cheap, commercially available drones and consumer chat programs are used to identify and communicate targets for weaponry that in many cases is multiple decades old. I highly recommend reading it, as it also reports on the situation in Bakhmut. And finally, an update for all you collectors out there. The Bank of Estonia has released a new 2 euro coin dedicated to Ukraine. The coin features the words Slava Ukraini, an ear of wheat, and shows a girl protecting a bird in her hand as a symbol of tenderness. The design is the work of Daria Titova, who came to Estonia as a refugee from Kharkiv. And that wraps up today's news report. If you want to read about individual topics in more detail, you can find links to the articles in the description. Thank you for listening in, and have a great day. This was The Account. Slava Ukraini.